I first just want to say welcome. It's really wonderful to have you all here. I'm Amelia Fink. I'm the Director of Nonprofit Funds and Endowments at Rose Community Foundation. I have met many of you, met via Zoom for the most part, some in person, but mostly via Zoom. And so those who I haven't yet had an opportunity to meet, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. We're really excited to be launching this nonprofit endowment cohort. And it's a little different this year, as we can all tell. This is the first time that we've done it virtually. And so really the curriculum will be the same, the content will be fairly similar, but it's a new way of doing things. You know, we're doing all things in a new way this year. So it's both, you know, a similar program, but also will be done in new ways. I still think that we'll be able to create this network and this community and really learn from each other, and that's the main goal. And so I'm really looking forward to having everyone here over the next 8-month period. So I first want to do introductions. And so I've introduced myself, and I'd like Susan Lanzer, who has her video on right now, I'd like her to just say hello.
Hi all, welcome. So nice to see so many new faces. And I am on the philanthropic services team at Rose Community Foundation.
And so Susan will be joining us in all of the sessions, and she's really, the role that we're calling it is she's the tech facilitator. So she's going to be helping us with all things Zoom. And so when we do polls, she'll be running the polls. When we're, you know, she'll be letting people in from the waiting room. She'll be making sure that everything runs really smoothly throughout our virtual program. So we really appreciate Susan being here, and I wanted to be sure that you were able to say hello to her and see her face. And yes, know that she'll be joining us throughout the program. So I now want to have each of the organizations introduce themselves. So we have 8 organizations that are in the program this year. And so again, it looks like everyone has renamed themselves so that it has your name, organizational role, and the organization. If you have not done that yet, please do so. And if you don't know how to rename yourself, if you hover over your face, and then you'll see in the top right-hand corner, there's a little ellipses. If you click on that, then you can see an option to rename. So you can just rename yourself that way. And you can either save it, so that's what it'll come up as for all future Zoom calls, or you can just do it each time. So if you can please rename yourself. And now I'd really like each organization to go ahead and introduce itself. So we're not going to have each individual introduce themselves right now. And really that's in the interest of time. You'll have an opportunity in later parts of the session to get to know one another in smaller groups. And so rather than having each person introduce themselves, I'd like to have one person from each organization introduce themselves, the other folks that are there from your organization, and give it just a 30-second spiel about what your organization does, you know, what your mission is. So we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Art Students League.
On mute. I apologize about that. You'd think I'd get used to it by now. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah James. I am the development manager with the Art Students League of Denver, and my board chair, Patrice Warner, will be joining us. She said she's in the waiting room and she can't get in, so I just messaged Susan, but she'll join us here shortly. And did you want me to share a little bit about the Art Students League, Amelia?
Had to unmute myself. Yes, just a quick 30-second spiel so we kind of know a little bit about the organization, but not all of it.
Great. So the Art Students League is an art school in Denver that's been around since 1987. We are, of course, a nonprofit organization located in the West Washington Park neighborhood at 200 Grant Street. We're in the old historic Sherman School building. So it was an old elementary school, so it lends itself well to visual arts classes that we offer. We have courses in painting, drawing, ceramics, and caustic. We really cover the gamut of visual arts courses. And we like to say that our courses are for anyone, artists ages 6 to 96 years old. We have youth programs, summer camps and events, exhibits that go on. And the thing I love so much about the Art Students League is that we really are an inclusive community for all artists at whatever level they're at. I am not an artist myself, but I have taken some courses and really enjoyed getting to have that opportunity to express myself in a really comfortable environment. So we're excited to be here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. So next we have ECPAC.
Hi, I'm Lisa Jansen-Thompson, the Executive Director of the Early Childhood Partnership of Adams County. And with me, I have Carrie Morris, who is one of our board members and has been forever and ever and ever. And we are a nonprofit organization that is looking to strengthen the early childhood ecosystem. And within that, we have three main pillars of our work. One is really focused on systems building and policy efforts to really work with community members to break down those barriers that exist for families of young children in getting what they need, both around their early learning needs, but also around health and mental health and family support and education and basic needs and housing and food. So we really work with partners to identify what those barriers are and how do we break those down through policy changes, through system changes, and through additional funding. And then our other two parts of our work are really to directly support childcare programs and improving their quality, knowing that high quality preschool can really make a huge difference for children's long-term academic outcomes. And then the third part of our work is our child and family health and well-being. And that's where we are both with our own staff as well as with working with community partners like Carrie's organization, are out directly working with families and helping them navigate the system so that they get their needs met and they get connected to the services that they need.
Thank you. So next we have, oh, sorry, I just dropped my pen. Next we have the Grow House.
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here today and to meet all of you over the course of the program. My name is Nathan McKenzie. I'm the Grow House's Director of Development. Joined on the call today by Nina Rummel, who is our Deputy Director of Development, and Kevin Carney, who's a longtime board member with the Grow House. Our mission is to cultivate community-driven food justice through food access and education. We run education programs around healthy food and wellness for kids and adults, do a lot of intergenerational programming. We have full cost, reduced cost, and no cost food distribution programming that we run. And we particularly work in the Globeville and Elyria Swansea neighborhoods of North Denver. So I'll pause there and look forward to sharing more down the road.
Thank you. Next we have Maria Drost Counseling Center.
Hello, I am Sandy Mon. I'm the CEO of Maria Drost Counseling Center, she, her, hers. I am joined here today by Marcina Holzhoppel, who's our Chief Development Officer, and Renee Cohen, who's our board member. We are a mental health counseling center that provides counseling regardless of ability to pay, and we do that by reducing barriers to access out in the community. We see folks in our outpatient center here at Colorado Boulevard near I-25, and then in schools, family justice centers, affordable housing centers, and senior living facilities. And we're excited to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sorry I mispronounced it. I had pronounced it Maria Drost previously, and then I heard someone else pronounce it the other way, and so then I tried this way. Anyway.
Yeah, we get it both directions, so that's totally.
Now we all know Maria Drost.
Yeah.
Next we have the Mesa Verde Foundation.
Hi, I'm Shannon Clifford, and I am the Executive Director of the Mesa Verde Foundation. And joining me today are Virgil Scott and Jim Wilkins, both board members of the Mesa Verde Foundation. So thanks to them for being here. As our name might suggest, we exist really to support Mesa Verde National Park. We work to promote understanding and appreciation of the park, and we raise funds to cover projects and preservation efforts that the federal government is unable to fund. So That's kind of us in a nutshell. We're a partner group to National Park, and we're very happy to be.
Thank you. Next, we have the Montessori School of Washington Park.
Hi, I'm Mary Perfield, and I'm the Executive Director at the Montessori School of Washington Park. I'm here with Leah Reed, who's our treasurer on our board of directors, but she also sent both of her children through our school from toddler age through kindergarten. Her last one just graduated last year. And we serve children 15 months to 6 years old, and really proud to be able to offer authentic Montessori for children in the Wash Park neighborhood.
Thank you. Now we have Rise Above Colorado.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kent McLennan. I'm the Executive Director of Rise Above Colorado. We are a statewide substance use prevention nonprofit organization. I'm joined today by one of our board members, Jeff Blue, and also we will have Kiki Traylor, who's not here but will be participating with us in this cohort as well in future sessions. So Rise Above Colorado, as I said, is a statewide organization. We work with a mission of empowering teens to make healthy choices about substance use. And we do that through a variety of means. We focus primarily on the age group of 12 to 17, so middle and high school students. We provide messaging through social norming campaigns, through online, digital and social media. And we also do community programming and partnerships with a variety of prevention organizations across the state to help give us that statewide reach directly to youth. And providing educational resources and community activities to support substance use prevention across the state.
Thank you. And finally, Summit Huts Association.
Hi, Amelia, good to see you. No moose out in the yard today, so no report there. Chris Tennell, I'm the Executive Director of the Summit Huts Foundation. Joining me today is Rich Rowley, who is our president. Summit Huts Foundation is based in Breckenridge, Colorado, and we provide a backcountry refuge for self-propelled mountain recreational users and unique venues for natural retreats for community, charitable, and educational programs up here in the mountains in Summit County.
Thank you. Yeah, good to see you too. So you can tell from just these brief introductions that the 8 organizations that are participating have very different missions, very different impact on the community. But over the course of the next 8 months, we're really all working towards the same goal. We're going to do a quick poll because as you can see from those introductions, it's lots of different folks from those organizations as well. We have board members, development, executive directors. So we're going to do a quick poll. Susan is going to post the poll. So if you can answer the poll question, and then we'll see kind of the ratio of who we have in the room right now. Okay, so it looks like we're missing just a few people. There we go. Great. Okay, so do you all see the poll results? Oh, share results. There we go. Now do you see the poll results? Okay, so executive director, development staff, and board member. And this really makes a whole lot of sense because through the program, it's engaging at least one staff member and at least one board member that are coming to each of these sessions. So it really does make sense. It's about half and half between those two. But this shows us that we're going to be sharing different perspectives over the course of the next 8 months, and that's really important to this working well. We also are going to be doing things like polling. We're going to be using different different ways of engaging within Zoom. And so we wanted to just try a poll out on this first time. We won't be doing more of that in this session, but next session we'll be doing a lot of it. So we want to be sure that we're really engaging and getting used to this technology, as though we're not used to it already from doing this for a while. So now that we've had the opportunity to introduce ourselves, I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll start a presentation. So I'm going to share right here. Okay. So is everyone seeing the presentation? Let me just give a quick thumbs up. I see some nods. Great. Okay, so welcome to the Nonprofit Endowment Cohort. We did these introductions already, and so you can see here all of the organizations that are participating. One thing that I want to mention is that this is a very diverse group of organizations, and you're in slightly different you're in slightly different parts of this endowment journey. And I say that mostly because 4 of the 8 organizations started this cohort in January. And so those 4 organizations, that was Summit Huts Association, Rise Above Colorado, ECPAC, and Art Students League, they have done the first really 1.5 sessions of the program. And so they had a little bit more, they've had some of this content, and they already started thinking through endowments a little bit more than those that are starting now. Of course, you understand why that cohort ended abruptly because of COVID in March. But I just wanted to let you all know that you're coming from slightly different places, but you are on this journey together and will be learning from one another. You already have the introductions to both Susan and I. The reason I put this on here was so that you have our contact information. You all have mine, but now you also have Susan's as well. So today's agenda, we have done introductions. We're now going to go into the nuts and bolts of the program. So we're going to talk about structure, the resources that are available, and the goals that we have. We'll then do just an endowment overview. And I won't be going into too many details of this because most of this content is the content that you all already had from your board presentations. So I won't be repeating myself. You'll just see those same slides very briefly. We're also going to introduce the Integrated Development Plan, which is the plan that you'll be drafting over the course of this program. And today we're really going to dig into the case statement. So the program structure, we have the board presentation, which has happened for 7 of the 8 organizations. We're doing Rise Above Colorado's tomorrow. We then have 6 sessions. And so you can see here what those sessions are. And then 2 individual coaching sessions. So the individual coaching sessions happen in December and then again in April. And the purpose of those is to talk about the integrated development plan and what's been drafted so far, answer any questions about the content that we've addressed so far, in order to be sure that we as Rose Community Foundation are supporting you in the way that you need. So we really want to be sure that we're not taking a one-size-fits-all viewpoint when it comes to how we're supporting these organizations. We want to be sure that it's really fitting your needs. So in terms of the content, today we're really doing an introduction. In November, we'll be talking about gifts that build endowments. And so that's really looking at what are the types of gifts that we're talking about. What are legacy gifts? Gifts in will, trust, retirement funds, life insurance policies. What are strategies we can use around appreciated assets? What does the philanthropic landscape look like right now? So we can kind of ground ourselves in the landscape and the types of gifts before we start talking about who are the right prospects. How do we market these gifts? How do we market that we have an endowment fund? How do we properly steward? So this fall, we're really kind of setting the groundwork, and then starting in January with prospects, making the ask, marketing, all of that will really then fill in that integrated development plan over the course of the next few months. So another portion of the program structure is the endowment fund itself. So the initial $10,000 contribution and the first Rose Community Foundation match is by December 31st of this year. And I've spoken to all of the organizations about that. And so each of you has a slightly different strategy for how you'll be doing that. And then the second $5,000 contribution plus the second Rose Community Foundation match is by the end of the program, so by the end of May. The integrated development plan is something that we'll be drafting over the course of the program. So by the end, you will have that drafted. I also want to show you that we have a resource library. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And then reshare it with the resource library so that you can see. Okay, so share. Are you all seeing? It's now a web page with Rose Community Foundation at the top. Okay, so this is your resource library. This is going to be your go-to throughout the program. And right now it's very small, but as we have each session, we'll be building that so that you have all the tools that you need, all the materials that you need, some additional reading. So really it will be, each session will have a section that you can look to and go to for any questions, additional information, and also for the session materials. So a section that will be included this afternoon, so before I send you the link, we'll have the cohort roster, so you have everyone's contact information and the schedule of sessions. So that hasn't shown up here yet, but will be there soon. And then here you see endowments, legacy giving, and the philanthropic landscape. These are just some articles and some additional tools if you want to read them and kind of learn a little bit more. And here is these session materials. And we'll actually be using this integrated development plan. And so Susan will put and she may actually, I can't see the chat, so she may have already done this. So she's doing it right now. So you'll be using this resource library and clicking into it toward the end of the session in order to look at that integrated development plan. So this really will be your go-to for all of the resources that you need throughout this program. So I will stop sharing that and then go back to, oh, it's gonna start from the beginning, sorry. Okay. Oh, sorry, I need to shift. There's always going to be some Zoom challenges, which is actually our next slide. Okay, so are you seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, so now we're going to talk about a few group norms. As you can see here, we all are feeling Zoom fatigue. It's been a long time since we've been able to come together in person for things. And so everyone is feeling a little bit of Zoom fatigue. So I wanted to go over a few group norms that are specifically related to Zoom before we talk about the goals of the program. Before I do that, I want to just open it up to see if anyone has questions about just the program structure. We haven't talked about goals yet. We haven't talked about any of that. So just if there are any questions about the program structure and what to expect, please either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask them. But I'd like to answer those first before we talk about our group norms and goals.
Amelia, I have a question.
Yeah.
What happens if you know already that you will not be able to be at one of the sessions?
That's fine. So some organizations will have the same board member and the same staff member at every session. Others will have maybe, one staff member that's always there and then different board members. So the group is going to differ each time. It's important to have both a staff member and a board member at each, just so that the knowledge is living in more than one place. But it doesn't have to be the same one every single time. Any other questions? Okay, so I will move on to our Zoom group norms. So the first is to be present. You're on your computer, your email is open. I recommend that you close it just so that you aren't distracted, but you have other things. So if that are going to distract you. So if you can be present as much as possible, that's really going to be the way to get the most out of this. With that in mind, be comfortable. So I'd love to have video on as much as possible so that we can see each other's faces, we can see each other's reactions. But if you need to turn off your video, stand up and do 10 jumping jacks because you're feeling tired, go ahead and do that. If you need to leave the room for a few minutes, whether that's for a phone call, if you need to use the restroom, if you need a snack, go ahead and do that. I want to be sure that everyone is very comfortable. And I also want to mention this is scheduled from 11:30 to 1. The reason for that is because I was engaging in some serious wishful thinking. I was hoping that we'd be able to be joining in when I made the schedule in June. I was hoping we'd be able to be in person by January, and that this could be a lunch meeting. So this would have been us coming together, and then Rose Community Foundation would have provided lunch, and this becomes a working lunch session. That is not happening. This is going to be a virtual program through the end, really, most likely. And so if you want to eat your lunch during this time, go ahead. It is lunchtime. And so if you're hungry, go ahead and eat your lunch. So be comfortable. The next is, and really these two go together, be vocal. So express your opinion. We all have different perspectives. And that's a really, really important part of this group. So please be vocal, and also be curious. If someone says something and you have a question about it, ask that question. If I say something that doesn't make sense, ask me about it. So be vocal, be curious, make sure that you are voicing your opinions and sharing your experience. It's really important that we're all sharing our experience because that's the best way for us to learn from one another. Be flexible and be understanding. We are, as you can see already, I've had a few little screen sharing snafus. That's going to happen over the course of this program. You can probably also see from my background that I have small children. You might hear my daughter cry at some point. You might hear my dog bark. We might hear someone else's child cry or dog bark. All of these things are just part of how we're doing business these days. So we need to be flexible and be understanding with the fact that everyone is working in a slightly different way than they're used to. And that also technology doesn't always work. So we need to be really flexible and understanding of that. And finally, be honest. So if I've never facilitated virtually before, so if something isn't working, let me know. We can have a conversation about it. If there's something that makes you uncomfortable, not necessarily with technology, but just be honest and open with me or with anyone else to be sure that we're all having the best experience possible. And so finally, I just want to see if anyone else has anything they'd like to add in terms of our virtual group norms. Okay, and you can either put it into the chat or you can just say it, you can unmute yourself and say it. And if not, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so I'm going to move on from this, but if there's anything that you want to add later, go ahead. So now we're coming to our program goals. And these are kind of the more tactical goals. These are the things that we are going to accomplish over the next 8 months. So the first is that each organization will have launched an endowment fund, including that match from Rose Community Foundation. You also will have drafted a plan to grow that fund over time. And that's the integrated development plan that I've mentioned and we'll go through today. You will have start engaging your most committed supporters in conversations about legacy giving and endowments. And we'll go into details about who those prospects are and how to have those conversations in January. And very importantly, you will have connected with peers in an environment of shared learning. And so that's why we want to be sure that we do have those kind of group norms so we can create the best environment to learn from one another. So our overarching goals, and you'll see that I have a rainbow here because these are big, lofty goals. Those overarching goals are to strengthen your organization to ensure sustainability for the future. And also to foster an organizational culture that focuses on building for the future. So it's both strengthening your organization and doing that through fostering that organizational culture that isn't just focusing on now, but is focusing on the future. And you all have already started that by deciding that you're going to start an endowment fund, and for some of you, for starting that fund already. And so these overarching goals are kind of what we want to keep in our mind as what we're truly hoping to accomplish. And those other goals, the program goals, are kind of our more, as I said, tactical ways that we're going to get there. So I wanted to see if there are other broad goals that you have, and if so, please type them into the chat. And if there aren't, that's okay. This is another time that you don't have to have some. Okay, so creating more opportunities for giving besides just annual giving. Absolutely. So giving your supporters the opportunity to impact the organization and impact the community in different ways. And really giving them a choice and understanding that they don't necessarily, they're not one size fits all, just like these organizations, that you want to give them different options and different opportunities. Become more versed in types of planned gifts. Absolutely. So Sarah, we'll be doing that in the next session. We'll be talking about different types of gifts and the strategies around those gifts. So providing ways for board members and donors to engage in new ways. Absolutely. So this is endowment work and legacy giving is a fantastic way for board members and donors to engage in new ways. And it's a way for the organization to be, you're learning with them, which is always a good opportunity. Okay, any others that we want to add? And if anyone wants to, you can put them in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that as well. So how to create an ask for both the annual fund and endowment. Absolutely. So we'll be doing that in January. We're going to have specific, we'll together be doing an ask for just endowment and a legacy gift, and then what's called an integrated or blended ask. So we'll be doing exactly what Nina just mentioned. Finding ways for board members to become more comfortable with legacy giving and asks. Absolutely. And that's something that started with the board presentation that we did earlier, kind of allowing board members to start understanding why endowment is important, and then we can provide opportunities to engage them down the road and develop a broader base of donors. Absolutely, absolutely. Did I miss any? I don't think. Okay. And so now I'd like you to think, and some of these were already put into the chat, but I'd like you to think about personal and organizational goals that you have. Please write them down now. So this doesn't need to be in the chat. Just write them down for yourself. We'll take about a minute to do that. And we'll talk about those goals at the first individual coaching session. So an example of that could be some of these things that we've already talked about in the chat. Or it could be, we'd like to have had conversations with half of our board members by the end of the program, something like that. It can really be whatever is the right goal for you all. So please take just a minute to think about that goal and to write it down. Okay, so I see some folks looking up, some folks still writing, so we'll give maybe 15 more seconds, and then we're gonna, I'm gonna open it up for any questions, and then we'll move on. Okay, so before we move on, does anyone have any questions kind of about the broad goals of the program and the structure of the program and some of the resources that will be available?
Amelia, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Something I've been thinking about, one of the wonderful benefits that you all offer to the endowment cohorts is continued support after the cohort completes. And I'm just curious, how, like, what does that look like? What have other organizations done when they've reached out to you? Is, you know, there a general theme of things that they reach out to you for? I'm just curious about that.
So a lot of the ongoing support has been board engagement, that organizations are looking for different types of board engagement. And so one thing that I've done is trainings for an entire board of directors on how to do an integrated ask. And so that's really talking about what is the role of the board in legacy conversations and in building this endowment. And so how can the entire board really become endowment ambassadors and start to have legacy conversations. So that's one type of support, just a very specific example. But board presentations they have generally been just whatever an organization feels like they need. There's also, so the trainings that you all are participating in, for the first time this year, I'm doing a second training that's available to all of our nonprofit fund holders, so that, for instance, the November session on gifts that build endowments, if an organization either participated in the cohort and wants a refresher, didn't participate in the cohort, or they have new staff, board members that they'd like to have that knowledge, they can then come to that session. So it's ongoing support through trainings that are facilitated by Rose Community Foundation, and then also access to things like the CPGR Summer Symposium. So that type of professional development support that we think is important to be able to pass on. But most importantly, it's about helping with what you need. And so it's about continuing to be in dialogue and understanding your challenges, your goals, and how we can support you in that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so, let's see. There we go. So this next section of the presentation, I'm not really going to go into detail on. These are all slides that you've seen through the board presentations. I wanted to include them here so that you can just quickly see them again and have a quick refresher, and also so that you have them if you're looking back at the materials later. So again, we have not done the board presentation for Rise Above Colorado yet. That's happening tomorrow. So you will see more of this tomorrow, and I'll go into greater detail about all of these slides. So I first just want to remind you all about Rose Community Foundation's mission. So our mission is to advance inclusive, engaged, and equitable Greater Denver communities through values-driven philanthropy. And so the community, often thinks about grant making when they think about Rose Community Foundation, but that third, the bottom part, increasing resources dedicated to strengthening the Greater Denver community, that portion is what we're really focused on here. And that's not the grant making side. That's helping support you as an organization in increasing your resources so that you can have a greater impact. So that's the philanthropic services side of the house, and that's really our goal here. It's to increase resources so that you can impact the community in a greater way. Okay. Oh, there we go. So you've all seen this before. So what is endowment? Just as a reminder, it's designed to preserve the principal and provide a reliable source of income over the long term. And I think this second part is really important, that it balances the current needs of the organization, so that distribution, with the long-term purchasing power. So we want to be sure it's a perpetual fund that can continue to create that distribution year after year after year. So it's really about that balance between the two. And again, it's not about that initial contribution, it's what it can provide year in and year out forever. So here we have our first example, disciplined growth and a reliable distribution. And then our transformative gifts, so the moose that Chris referenced at the beginning. So this one shows the importance of planned giving, the importance of stewardship, and that those gifts, when they are realized, really do impact the distribution and the future purchasing power. So why is an endowment important? You've seen this. You have not seen this yet. So how is an endowment typically funded? Endowments, that initial contribution can come from many different places, but these are examples of how they often are funded. So it could be from extra reserves. So an organization that has been building reserves over time and has decided that rather than having, let's say, 2 years of reserves that are cash, that it really makes a lot of sense to start investing those funds so that they can grow over time, and that they want to be able to have the discipline to get that annual distribution each year while growing that fund in a perpetual way. So it could be extra reserves. It could be sale of an asset. I've seen that a lot of times where an organization perhaps owns a building, and when they sell that building, that then they create the endowment fund out of the proceeds from that building. The retirement of a founder, that's really an important inflection point for an organization, and it could be that donors come together and want to create an endowment in honor of that founder's retirement, or that the founder herself wants to create that fund. So retirement of a founder, that really important inflection point of an organization, could be when an endowment is funded. Receipt of an unexpected bequest. This is a really important one, and we'll talk a lot about this over the next 8 months. If you have received an unexpected bequest, these gifts are generally much larger than gifts given during a lifetime. And so that's a really great opportunity to then start this type of fund. It could be a committed supporter. So this is sort of like the retirement of a founder. There might be one person who has said, I have seen an endowment fund change an organization, and I want to be able to provide that for you. So they might provide the seed funding for that endowment that then can grow over time. And finally, a capital campaign. So organizations might choose to start an endowment fund alongside a capital campaign to ensure that what they're building can that can continue on, that they always have the funds for anything that needs to happen in order to any repairs, anything that they would need for that building. So a capital campaign is a time that organizations will start a fund. Does anyone have any others that they'd want to add to this list? Okay, and let's see, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so I will move on. So what about growing your endowment? How are endowment funds generally grown? So the way that that's done is by promoting a culture that builds for the future. So those overarching goals that we looked at earlier, it's really about creating that culture that isn't just looking at current needs, it's looking at future needs. And so what are the factors that go into that? Prudent investment management, and that's where Rose Community Foundation comes in. And you all have heard about our relationship with our outsourced CIO at JP Morgan Endowments and Foundations Group, our investment committee. So we take the responsibility of prudent investment management very, very seriously on your behalf. Board approved investment and spending policies. These are really important. And this is a session that we'll have in the spring. So in order to create the culture that's building for the future, you need to have the policies in place that ensure that will be happening, not just now, but also down the road. A champion leader. So having the folks on your board who are really your endowment and legacy champions, that's a way that you're going to grow this endowment and promote that culture of building for the future. A sense of urgency can be helpful. And by that, I mean that whether it's that you are, the Rose Community Foundation match is a way for you to kind of start that fund. Having a deadline for something can help to grow a fund. And so you might find that in your integrated development plan that you create certain deadlines for yourselves in order to help grow the fund. And we can talk about what that might look like in the individual coaching sessions. And then most importantly, these two final ones in bold, marketing, marketing for bequests and planned gifts and donor stewardship. Planned giving, legacy giving is a very, very important way to grow this fund over time. And so this is where we're really going to be focusing the bulk of our time and our energy is on understanding these gifts, how to market them, how to steward the donors so that you can grow this endowment fund over time. So this is again a repeat from the board presentation, but just I wanted to repeat it here that there truly is that natural connection and that it's a unique way to grow a fund and a really important way to grow a fund. So I'm going to take a quick sip of water before we talk about the integrated development plan. So the integrated development plan is the plan that you will be drafting over the course of the program. And so there's the case statement, management plan, prospect list, marketing plan, stewardship, and then goals and implementation. And you'll see that they correspond to different sessions. So today we're going to spend most of the rest of the time talking about the case statement. The prospect list will be in January. So we're going to talk about the prospect list and making the ask in January. Marketing and stewardship will be in February. And then the individual coaching will be the time that we talk about the progress of the plan. So now, actually, I'll go back to this and see if anyone has questions about the plan. No, okay. So we're now going, so your homework assignment for this session was to bring an object or an image that represents what connects you to your organization. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for the next 10 minutes to talk about those objects. So when you go into your breakout rooms, I'd first like you to introduce yourself. Since we didn't have the opportunity to do that at the beginning, I'd like for each of you to introduce yourselves and just sort of, get to know each other for a minute or so. And then I'd like each person to share the object or image that you chose with your group. So the questions that you can consider are, why did you choose this object? In what ways does it speak to your connection to your organization? And how does it represent your organization's impact? And then at the end of that 10 minutes, we'll be sharing out. So be prepared to share a few themes with the larger group. And not everyone needs to share something, but just if one person from each group is able to share a few themes. So I'm going to stop sharing. And before we go into the rooms, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. So Susan is going to break us out into groups, and then we will come back here in 10 minutes. So I think everyone is now back. So I'm not going to share my screen while we're sharing out so that we can all see one another. But yeah, so if someone can volunteer to share out and just let us know what were some of the themes that came up, or what were things that you noticed in your group conversations.
I can start us off. So we each brought really lovely items, and to be frank, we wasn't sure if there was a two-part question to this, so we shared our items and then talked about those and what that could look like even for campaigns. So the grow house, Nina brought seeds. So we really talked about like that root and growing like for tomorrow, like thinking about tomorrow's plan by growing today. And that kind of process oriented. So the process of, it's not always the product, it's the process of learning. And then that fed perfectly into Mary's Montessori school. She shared artwork from a child that said, thanks for helping us grow. So we have that growing theme again. And again, it's the process in Montessori, not like what you produce, it's how you get there, what you learn. And Jim from Mesa Verde brought an artifact, like an ancient ladle that is just gorgeous. And so we talked about like connections between history and then now and the future, and the nourishing idea of shared community and food. And then I brought a light bulb for mental health being a beacon of light and hope for folks, especially right now in kind of a dark and challenging time of 2020. So really that idea of that arc of, planning, like sustaining today and planning for tomorrow, that life cycle, there's just a lot of crossover there. So hopefully that answered the questions you were hoping for, Amelia.
It did. No, that's perfect. It really is. It's about your connection, and what it represents to you. This really was a very personal thing, and having those. It's really wonderful that there were those threads and those themes that came up. And I've written a few notes, and then we'll kind of thread everything together after we hear from the other groups.
I'll share I'm sorry. Okay. I'll share our group. I noticed the biggest theme that kept coming up was the personal connection. And I'm sorry, my video looks like it's slowing down. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Okay, yeah, let me know. It's been a little wonky. It definitely was personal connection, close to the heart, life-changing. I would say hands-on, getting involved. I felt like everyone had a personal story in our group that they shared with, that had to do with the object that they brought.
Great, thank you. And was it Jeff? Did I see that you were about to speak when Sarah started speaking as well? Did I see that?
Yeah, although I didn't really know what to say, I was about to speak since nobody seemed to be. So what was interesting, the different objects that were shared in our group were very unique to the organizations, and kind of just highlighted the different goals and projects of the groups. But what was really, I thought they were just kind of a good touch to get an idea of who the organizations are and what they're looking to do. So.
And can you share maybe just one example of what the object was?
Sure. Chris shared for the Summit Huts organization, he shared one of the log books from one of the huts. And I can only imagine what an amazing thing would be to just get to one of the huts and sit and read by the fire, for a couple hours from one of the log books, and just from all the people who have been going through. And it really highlights the impact that organization has.
That's great, thank you. And I think we have one group left, I believe.
I think that might be.
I'm happy to go.
Go ahead.
Okay, we must have 2 groups left then.
We must. I think there must have been 5 rooms, not 4.
Okay, I'll be really quick. Ours was similar to another. It was the personal connection. And so either the organization connected to us personally because of an experience that we'd had with something within the organization, or it connected us because of a value that we hold dear to us, and this organization helps fulfill that value in some way. So that would be, we had a very similar to another group.
Thank you. And then Virgil, it looked like that you were the last group. No? Oh, was it you, Nathan?
We may have, yeah, we're one of the groups to go at least. I was with Kent and Renee. One common thread outside of the objects that stood out to me was just how we're all excited to learn and at different points in our journeys, but have a lot to learn as we continue on them. Kent's object was a phone, because that's the way that a lot of the folks they serve connect with their mission. Renee creatively brought a straw, and that was the way to represent sort of bringing in this nourishment and connecting with their mission. And Renee said it much more eloquently than that. And then I also brought seeds. I swear Nina and I did not coordinate at all, so that was great. And yeah, so it was unique to just see, I think, the different representations of our missions.
Great, thank you so much. And did we miss anyone, any groups? Okay, and is there anything else that anyone wants to add? No, okay, great. So thank you for doing that. I think that thinking about values was really important, and just, again, the personal connections, and that those personal connections Some of them might be the same, you know, the fact that Nathan and Nina both brought seeds, that could be really representative of the impact of the organization. And also that a lot of times it's very, very different. I heard the words life-changing, getting involved, highlighting the impact, a shared community. So all of these things, all of these personal connections that we have to the organizations that we're here representing are really important to keep in mind as we start this work, and particularly as we start thinking about the case statement, which is what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session. So I am going to reshare my screen and reshare the presentation. And I was hoping that you'd have some time to break out with your organizations to start talking about the case statement, but we might not have time to do that. So we'll need to be a little flexible and see if we have a few minutes or if that's just not going to work today. So I will now share my screen and we can start. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like you're seeing, let me stop this share. Okay, let me try that again. Here we go. So I will go from here. Okay, so are you seeing the slide that we left off from? Okay, so we just did the share out. So now we're going to talk about the case statement. And this is the first part of that integrated development plan. So the case statement is an opportunity for you to articulate your role as an essential community resource. So the case statement is a tool that you can use to articulate why the mission of your organization is worth ensuring for future generations. So why should you start an endowment fund? Why is it important that you're around 50 years from now, 100 years from now? So rather than a static document, it should be a set of key messages that can be used in marketing materials and can also inform conversations with donors. So some organizations choose to create kind of a one-pager of their case statement, and that's great, that's fine. But really the purpose of a case statement is that it can be flexible, that you can kind of pick and choose what you need depending on what it's for. So whether it's for marketing or if it's for a conversation with a donor. So it should articulate your impact and core values. So a lot of the things that we were just talking about in our conversation, and convey the emotional connections individuals have to your organization. Okay, so what do I mean by that? What I don't mean is for you to rattle off a bunch of numbers. This is not an impact report. This is not an annual report. This is not where you say the number of people that you have impacted. This is not where you kind of talk about the laundry list of the specific programs that you do. All of those things are really important, but instead of saying what the numbers are or what the programs are, you talk about what do those numbers mean? Why and how are they impacting people? And how do those programs further your mission and your impact on the community? So it's a hard thing to articulate, because I think that we often want to talk about the what and the numbers and what that impact looks like, but really you need to think back to that emotional connection and why it matters in the long run. So here's an example. This is just a snippet from the Logan School. They had created a case statement and they did decide to kind of create a one-pager. And again, that's fine to do, but it's not something that you have to do. And so this is just one part of theirs. So they said the Logan School's approach, called creative learning, produces teenagers and adults who are exceptionally creative, self-directed, and engaged in their communities. So that's the impact. People who have gone to the Logan School, they then are exceptionally creative, self-directed, and engaged in their communities. When you've gone to the Logan School, you always think of yourself as a Logan kid. So that shows how it impacts these individuals long into the future. And it helps them acquire a love of learning that has stuck with them throughout their lives. So they didn't say, we serve, I'm making these numbers up, 300 kids each year, and our alumni network of thousands does this and this and this. It's talking about what it really means to have gone to the Logan School and why that impacts them in the future. So I want to open it up to any questions about this, because again, this is a very difficult thing to do because we generally want to start with numbers. And this is really more, it's a little bit more abstract than that. So does anyone have any questions or any comments about this?
Could you back up to the slide before?
Yep.
Thank you.
So one of my challenges with counseling services is really speaking in generalities and numbers because we can't share specific client stories. And I don't know if I really have a question. It's just my nervousness about moving into this case statement. So like we shared narratives that are created from a bunch of different client stories.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just generalizing that, I guess.
It is. So if I jump back to this, it's a tool. So yes, you're not necessarily, this isn't necessarily the place for one testimonial. You can use testimonials, you can use specific stories to help influence what you're saying is the reason why your mission is worth ensuring for future generations. So yeah, you're bringing all of these things together to come up with a few key messages. And again, it's the impact and core values and emotional connections. So you're right that by looking at those stories and the individual impact, that's how you're able to think about what the larger, more general impact is and why you are an essential community resource. And I will say it one more time, it's difficult to do. Any other questions or comments about that? Okay, so this is where we're planning to have breakout rooms. And I think instead, what we're going, because it's really just not a lot of time to do the breakout rooms, instead, I'm going to open up the integrated development plan from the resource library, and we can look at the questions together. So we'll look at the questions that Rose Community Foundation has drafted to start to help you think about what should be included. And as we look at those questions together, you can ask any questions or kind of give me some initial thoughts that relate to your organization. So I'm going to stop sharing this and open up this document and share the document. Okay, so share this document. So what we're looking at is and are you all seeing the integrated development plan outline? Great, okay. So this first section is the case statement. And you'll see right here the exact wording that was on that slide. So in order to draft the case statement, you first want to describe what connects you to the organization. Why is it meaningful in your life? So that relates directly to that exercise that you all just did with the other folks that were in your breakout rooms. So it's starting at the point of thinking about what connects me to this organization. And then a little bit broader, describe the impact your organization has on the community. So then here we have, why should the mission of your organization be preserved for future generations? It's important for you as a team or each of you individually to really think about that and articulate that, and then have a conversation about it and see where there's overlap, see where you agree, and what actually might be slightly different about why you think it should be preserved for future generations and why someone else does. I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions about that. Okay, so then I'll continue moving on. What are your organization's core values? And then make the case for how an endowment will strengthen your organization and ensure it can remain an essential community resource now and into the future. So why is an endowment important? Really thinking about that specific question is important as you are going to be having conversations with donors, having conversations with supporters, and thinking about how to grow the fund over time. And then this last one, we'll talk more about when we look at prospects and then marketing, but who could provide a powerful testimonial that describes the impact of your work? What would that person say? So thinking about what someone might say helps you answer those other questions. And then very specifically, knowing of someone who could provide a testimonial will help with marketing down the road. So those are the questions to start drafting the plan, or sorry, to start drafting a case statement. And so what I would like for you all to do is sometime between now and the next session to take 20 minutes, 30 minutes with your team members and start thinking about these questions. And again, that could be that you do it separately and then come together, or that you want to have a collaborative brainstorming session around these questions. I think that it's really important that you think about this before moving into who are the prospects, what are the gifts, because you always, always, always want to ground yourself in why this is important more than how. So I think that's why we're starting here. And we won't go over this in the next session. We'll talk more about it in the individual coaching sessions, but I do want to be sure that you find the time to do it before the next session. Any questions about that? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see faces. Has anyone ever drafted a case statement, not necessarily for endowment fundraising, but for something else, for another type of fundraising?
Yeah, so actually Carrie sits on our resource development committee, and just 2 weeks ago we drafted ours. So it'll be interesting to kind of go through it and look at these questions and see. I think we drafted ours more for like a quick donation. So how we shift that, sorry, my dogs have opinions about that as well. How we shift that to really fit more of a long-term commitment, I think is what we have to kind of look through.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Lisa, that a general case statement is different from this, in that with a general case statement, you're reaching donors who might not necessarily know you all that well. However, with an endowment and legacy case statement, you're reaching the supporters who know and love you. And so you don't need to tell them that you have 6 programs that do this, that you impact this many kids, that you do this and this and this, because they already know that, and that's why they're connected to you. So it's about kind of reaching a little bit deeper and thinking about the long term, rather than just wanting to kind of bring someone in because of the impact that you have. Does that make sense? Why they're different? Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions or experience that people have had drafting a case statement? Okay. And I know that I've said this quite a few times at this point, but it doesn't have to be a one-pager. It really is about finding just a few points that each person can use differently. So it's meant to be very, very dynamic rather than a static document. Okay, so I am going to, actually I don't really need to share my screen for the rest of the presentation, because it's just saying thank you and letting you know how much I appreciate all of you being here and how excited I am about going through this work with you all over the next many months. Our next session is on November 19th, I think. Maybe I should have put the slide back up so I had the exact date. It's the Thursday before Thanksgiving. And that session is on gifts that build endowments. And so we'll be joined by Judy Altenberg, who's our Director of Plan Giving and Advisor Relations. And the two of us will be facilitating the conversation about different types of gifts. We'll start with kind of more of an overview of the philanthropic landscape a little bit and talk about bequests and the importance of individual giving, and then talk about the specific vehicles and some strategies around that, and really look at appreciated assets and how how you can kind of shift the way that you're getting gifts now and focus a little bit more on appreciated assets in a way that greatly benefits your organization. So between now and then, please do try to have that conversation with the other folks that are in your organization about the case statement. And I will also be sending a survey out to help us kind of understand where our understanding of these types of gifts are, where each person stands. And so by that, I mean, has your organization received a bequest? Have you ever had a gift? Have you been the beneficiary of an IRA? So we'll kind of, I'll be getting that information on the front end so that we can have a richer conversation during the session. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we have 3 minutes, I think. And so we can either end 3 minutes early, or if anyone has questions or comments, we can stick around for a few minutes.
Access to the library and the slides, is it password protected, or how you deal with that?
No, it's not password protected. It's in a place on our website where you can only get to it if you have the link. So I will be sending that link in the follow-up email from this session. So you'll have that link and then all of the session materials.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay, well, thank you. I really appreciate your time and you being here. And next time I hope to see some folks eating lunch because it is lunchtime. So I will, and thank you, Susan, for all of your help. And please reach out with any questions and I will see you all soon.